Please rise for invocation by Pastor Sheila Turner. Thank you for coming.
Let us bow our heads and hearts together. We thank you, Father, for this evening in this commission's meeting. We thank you that you're allowing us to make the right decisions for this city. And we thank you, Father, for everything. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Here.
Here. Here. Here. Here. Item 4, recognition of Mary Whitmire with her 35-year pin. Before we progress with that, I was just thinking what was going on 35 years ago. 1984, there's this little album by Van Halen of the same name, 1984. I was a junior at Spruce Creek High School, getting ready to become a senior in sleepy little Port Orange, and I was thinking, well, we've grown to the interstate, we must be done growing, right? There's nowhere else where we could go. Now we got everything over there. This was 1984. That's when Mary started volunteering with the Volunteers and Police Services. She's one of our originals. And council, if you join me below, we're going to recognize her for 35 years of volunteer service to the city of Port Orange. Chief, the floor is yours.
Okay, for those of you in the audience who, Mary Whitmire is part of our VIP program, our Volunteers and Police Service. And those that don't know what our Volunteer and Police Service is, each one of the individuals standing in back here in the uniforms are our VIPs. Some of our VIPs, not the entire contingent, but some. They help us out tremendously on a daily basis. They provide services that typically we would provide police officers for. We can pull our police officers and send them to other calls for service to service our citizens. So they very, very, very much are of value, not only to the police department, but to the entire city. Before I begin speaking about Mary, I'd like to call up their major, Major LaMountain. Pat LaMountain, would you step forward, please? Pat's our major of the VIP team, and she helps run the daily operations there. Mary Whitmire, so as the mayor said, Mary began her service with Port Orange VIPs in 1983. And during that time, she served 5 chiefs, I'm told, which she probably deserves an award just for that alone. I know how we can get, and I'm told how we can get. So you probably deserve an award for that. But during her 35 years, she served different capacities on the VIPs. So she served as a secretary, the treasurer. She's served us in the police department with not only our patrol division, she's helped out our traffic division, and even has served time with our detective division, chasing down pawn tickets and pawn shop lists and stuff for us so that we can investigate crimes. Mary, on average, averages, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, over 900 hours a year volunteering for our city. She is in our building at least 3 times a week, serving right now. She does a lot of our courier service. We see her all over the city. She'll come to City Hall, does anything really that we ask for. But it's not just that, it's these special events too. Whenever we pick up the phone and say, we have a special event, and all of our VIPs respond, but Mary as well, and she responds to our family days, our spring fair, our 4th of July events, our Christmas parades. Any event that is there, you'll see Mary out there working.
We're all having fun. They're working.
Yes.
Remember that when you see them.
But, we talk about her service, but what's just as important as her service, and probably more important, is, Mary, anytime you see her, she's smiling. She has a great attitude. Something that I can't put a price tag on that, and I so appreciate it. Mary, if you'd step forward, please. You have a pen? Mary, on behalf of the entire police department, the Port Orange Police Department, and dare I say the city of Port Orange, thank you so much for your service. And again, thank you not only for your service, but thank you for the great disposition you bring into our police department every day. We love seeing you, and we can't wait to 35 more. So. Congratulations.
For those who don't know, this is what a 35-year pin looks like. There are so few of them. So very few of them. This is a very rare thing and a distinguished honor. Not the only
They're
one.
very rare, though. That's true.
We're not done yet.
We're not done yet.
We need a picture with the council. We'll do a picture. Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of hours.
I know.
Don't tell stories about me.
I remember when.
We got a pledge of secrecy.
Mary, we take a picture?
Come on up here, Mary.
Scott's career began and ended in the police department during Mary's term of volunteering.
And she's still there.
That's right. Okay.
I will let Robin go. You want to get in a position, Robin? Will you
Yeah,
grab
but
one?
just drop her, move to the side. There we go.
Look here, Robin.
All right, thank you.
And let me say one more thing. All these wonderful people in blue shirts could use some help. Anybody who's interested in joining the Volunteers and Police Services, Dwight Galt paid me $20 to say that he's recruiting me. So I'll get you a check later. But seriously, anybody watching at home, if you're interested, call the Port Orange Police Department. We'll get you the information. Dwight will get you an application. We'd love to have you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Here goes nothing.
We'll give everybody a minute to clear out.
I think Mary should have a stripe on her uniform for every hurricane she's worked, because I know she's been
You have
been
to wear
here.
a long sleeve shirt.
She would have
They
to.
don't make shirt sleeves that long, do they?
Okay.
May I have a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda for tonight is approved. Public comments on consent agenda items only. Anybody like to speak to anything on the consent agenda? Come on.
Savannah Weaver, Port Orange. Council, Mayor, last meeting, we just did the same thing. We waived over $5,000 of fees for a developer. Mr. Reinhagen had made a great point. What precedent are we setting, and what standards do we have? Another developer is now asking, well, they paid $4,500 and is now asking for a refund of over $3,900. We understand this is not impact fees, but if this is calculated as actual cost of staff review, could this money possibly go towards possible higher wages? And because it has recently been brought to my attention that the National Association of Government Employees and the Civil Workers Union have stated that we have high employee turnover that leave to go to other cities and that we don't have competitive wages. And so I just want our employees to feel like they're worth more, along with why are we waiving fees for developers? I'm aware that there's another agenda item where a developer is requesting to waive a fee. And then there's also another agenda item where there's an amendment to a PCD MDA. Will that developer be asking for a fee waiver too? Why did we set these standards if we're constantly going back on them? Or because what if every small business or what if every homeowner comes before you and starts asking if we can track staff review to lessen their fees? Are we going to also do that? So I would like you to possibly reconsider this because these are not non-for-profit. They are not nonprofit developers, and we need to be setting a good precedent. So I'm asking you to please reconsider waiving this fee. Thank you.
Who's next? Robert, I saw your hand, right?
Mayor, council members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 Dexter Drive, Port Orange. The only other thing I'd like to add is that while you did mention the need for flexibility, I would suggest that you consider looking at making the fee schedule more flexible. And in that way, everybody will be playing by the same rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on. If you want to speak to any of the issues on the consent agenda, be ready, please. Come on up, Paul.
Paul Rosar, 607 Powers Avenue, Port Orange, Florida. I think there should be no waivers, period, for a developer. They should have their monies already. They should not even be considered without their monies, period. This is Port Orange. We're running out of property to develop. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I don't see anybody else. Okay. Can I have a motion in regards to the consent agenda?
So moved. Move to approve.
We have a motion for approval of the consent agenda, items 7 through 12.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? I'm sorry, we got a resolution. Call the roll.
Councilman Miles,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Councilman Silver.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont,
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. Citizen participation. Let's start with Mr. Andrew Burns.
Evening, gentlemen. I live 1160 Millbrook Avenue, Port Orange. It's right at the intersection of Taylor Road and Spruce Creek Road. And in the last 3 years, I've watched a steady increase of vehicles that have no mufflers, pickup trucks, cars, and the roar is incredible. You come to my house, hang out in the backyard by the pool, have a nice cool drink, and listen to the roar of the traffic. I mean, it's just gotten to the point. I started off by talking to one of the police officers, and he told me, well, we have a decimal meter for it. I wasn't satisfied with that. I emailed the, one of the officers, and she passed it on to the police department. I heard nothing for 3 weeks. I got back to her and said, who'd you hand it to with the police? He says, oh, he retired. I'll pass on again. Officer came to my house and basically told me the same thing. We have no way to stop it. And code enforcement only handles noise at properties, bars, and whatever. They don't handle it on the street. And I'm like, well, if you have a decimal meeting, how do you pick that up when your cars are going by you? They're not standing there waiting for you to tell them how loud they are. And, well, he left. I moved on to, I believe, the controller I sent the next email to. And he sent a sergeant to my house. And I said, well, at least we're moving up. And he says, yes, you made an indentation. I'm like, well, good, let's get something done. And he told me the same thing. They don't have any tools to do it. And from where I used to live in New Jersey, I had lots of friends in the police force, and I understand their frustration when they don't have the tools to help their citizens that they want help, but they have no tools. And as I discussed it with the mayor in emails, I guess you gentlemen are aware of heard of the Doppler effect. You know, when something's coming at you and going away, the sound changes. So you can't measure it with a stationary device. I think a simple resolution would be to have a motion or an ordinance that all vehicles should have a manufacturer's muffler or some a Midas imitation of a, you know, I don't want to go to a dealer, but an imitation, some kind of muffler on it. I mean, catalytic converters were invented to make the air cleaner. These cars are no catalytic converter, no muffler. They're affecting the health and everything else of everybody in the town. So I would like to see you gentlemen do something. Thank you.
Thank you. If I'm going to butcher the last name, so forgive me. If I call Garrett Tenai, tell me how close I got.
Pretty close,
You're going to introduce yourself and correct, and when you come to the microphone, and correct me anyway, right?
Mayor Chase, how you doing? Garrett Tynai, 68 Raintree Drive. I'm just here to voice my opinion about the great historic oak tree out in front of our neighborhood. If our neighbors in stand who's here in favor, or raise their hands for the tree. I'll just read bits and pieces of the email I sent Bobette. It basically says, I'm voicing opinion to save the historic oak tree out in front of Raintree off Taylor Road. I believe a small adjustment to the common ground on either side of the tree island could widen the road enough to preserve the bulging root system. I've been a resident for this area for over 40 years. I grew up in Leisure Villas, then moved to Ponce Inlet, then bought a home in Raintree 68. I've been there since 2003. I've been there for 15 years. The tree has always been to value, scenic value, historic value of our neighborhood. We enjoy its beauty and prestige every time we enter or pass by our home. Many or nearly all of the neighborhood residents are in support of keeping the tree. Not the one or two bothered by the slight inconvenience of the root bumps that can be remedied by widening the road there or even taking away some of the common ground up front to pass by safely. Please take in our consideration to save this great tree. We'd like to reestablish a sign to welcome our guests as well when all has been decided. Thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And we've got Dave Vantoff, looks like on the same issue.
Good evening, Mayor, members, council. Thank you for your time. Dave Vantoff, Raintree Drive, the Raintree Subdivision, District 2. The March 6th, the city posted the sign about removing this historic tree. It gave to March 31st to solicit opinions. The city had an environmental board meeting on March 20th and didn't tell the citizens that this was going on. We notify citizens on code enforcement, city zoning, even paving the roads. So why can't we notify citizens on what's going on with other boards within the city? I've been a member on that road since 1991. Bought it from the original owner, my grandfather. So to say that I've been associated with this tree for over 40 years. So instead of removing it, have other considerations been made for repairing it, like we've done in Town Park, we've done in Madeline Ave, and we've done in our own entrance to City Center to save this tree. Please save it. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all might want to stick around for our council comments section because I'm going to ask the assistant city manager to update the status of that. And also you might want to stick around for a little later in the meeting as we discuss a tree preservation ordinance for the city. So there's a lot going on. Stay tuned. Obie Walker.
How are you doing, Council and Mayor?
How you doing tonight?
My name is Obie Walker. I live at 5335 Du Bois Avenue. In February 2002, I moved to a quiet dead-end street with only 3 homes on it. In my front yard, I had a canal that had otters, ducks, birds, and fish. It was a nice place. So we had a new home put on the property, our forever home. Things were good. Then about 2010 or 2011, Massey Construction bought the property on US 1. 5460 Ridgewood Ave is the address. When he started to bridge the canal from US 1 to Du Bois, we had concerns. So we had the city manager at that time, Ken Parker, the engineers, Public Works, superintendent come to see what was going on. They assured me it was just a shop to fix trucks, no flooding would affect us. When Massey finished, he filled the property with over 6 feet of fill, making his property 4 feet higher than mine and my neighbor's property. Now when we have a heavy rain or storm, our property has over 2 feet of flood water. I have been to council meetings and told that would be looked into. That was 5 or 6 years ago. I have heard nothing. Now I have a canal that stinks. I have no life in the canal. Mosquitoes and the water is stationary. Massey's property on the residential side would have held the overflow, which it always had. It is in our yard at the end of the dead-end street on Du Bois. Massey's property is 4 feet higher than all the residentials on that side of the canal. Now, to make matters worse, Massey bought the property across the canal in front of us, less than 100 feet away from my bedroom window. I again had concerns. I was assured it was only for parking. I now have dump trucks, front-end loaders, concrete saws, and whatever else can make noise 24/7. The noise is bad enough during the day. In cooler weather, I can't even open my windows for the noise and the dust. I've had my truck, my wife's car, my house, everything outside covered in dirt. I'm not asking for anything that any normal person would not expect. This has been going on for over 8 years. I don't know if the flooding can be fixed, but I would only think it fair to have Massey put up an 8-foot concrete block wall to stop the noise. This is a residential neighborhood. I had tried to have this resolved numerous times by calling code enforcement, police. Code enforcement says they sent emails. Deborah Pearson from code enforcement has been very helpful, but the noise is not when code enforcement is working. I've contacted the police on numerous occasions. By the time they arrived, the people have stopped working. I was also informed.
Wrap up in the next 5 seconds or so there?
Yeah. I'm retired and I won't get a fair price for my property if I sell it, and I really don't want to move from where I am.
I think
Thank
we
you very
got the
much.
gist of what you're saying.
I've also left a letter from my next door neighbor. He lives in New York, so he
Thank you.
couldn't be here.
Thank you.
Jack, that's your district. I'm gonna make sure you have Obi's address so that you can talk to him and then you can read back that.
Yeah, I've got a little insight on that anyway, so.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Savannah Weaver.
Yeah, take a picture of your phone or you want me to just
Savannah Weaver, Council, Mayor. I just wanted to come up here and hope that we can facilitate some better communication between the council and the city to the community. I've been looking at other cities' agendas and like Daytona Beaches, and I thought it was really great how they talked about how you can have access to the disability for disabled. And then when you go through it, it's not 500 pages long, and so you don't have to scroll for forever, and it's really easy to access, like, hey, here's this agenda item, you can go on it, click the link to find out more information instead of scrolling for forever. I also think it's really great how they include these notes on here on how the consent agenda works for people who show up and don't necessarily know how city council meetings work. So I believe that we should really do something to improve this for Port Orange. And then also, this newsletter, I just don't understand why we're spending tax money to talk about increasing taxes. And there's really a lot of space that we could have used in here to communicate things to our public, like how there's open board positions. And I also would like to see our city hall social media, maybe post more on how we're going to be having council meetings and how what's on the agenda. Daytona Beach does it. You know, I don't understand why we can't do it. So I'd really like to just see more communication because it gets really frustrating on this end for not only me, but a lot of people. Thank you.
Council comments, we'll start with Scott.
I'm good tonight.
You sure?
Yeah.
Drew?
I just want to comment again, we had another successful big event, the No Dough Bus Show this past weekend at City Center. It was pretty much, there were Volkswagens from end to end and a ton of people, so another well-attended event. So just want to give kudos to staff for all they do and for putting those, for facilitating these events. And, we had good weather and a great turnout, so congratulations to staff and everybody else that participated in making these things happen.
Chase?
No, nothing. I did want to give a compliment, and I mentioned it earlier to our fire chief. I did see our new transport unit out. While I was not a proponent of the initiation of it, I will support the implementation of it. And I appreciated seeing the American flag and the patriotism all across it. So hats off to our chief and our fire department, and certainly wish a great success.
Jack?
I have three things.
Go ahead.
Hopefully it won't take too long. One is there's an election on April 30th for this District 1 seat. So if there's a prevailing party out there that ends up being elected on the 30th with 50% or more of the vote, this would be my last meeting. So I would like to thank the staff for their support and guiding me, and also council for putting me in this position. I'm very grateful. It's been a growing experience for myself, and certainly learned quite a bit of how the city works. And you guys have been great in terms of sharing ideas and thoughts. So staff, thank you very much. I've learned that you have a lot of knowledge and you're professionals in your job, and you do a superb job. So take my hats off to you, because I've seen the inside of how the city works, and it's very, very interesting and rewarding. Secondly, meeting with the auditors last week, I was looking at the financials, and one of the things that really jumped out at me, and I'm sure it's been talked about on the council before, but I'm the new guy on the block, so just wanted to kind of bring it up and see what the council thought about it. But I noticed every group, such as fire, police, and general pension, have an administrative fee of around $76,000 to $80,000. To me, it seems logical that we hire a person in-house, administrative person in-house to do that job for around $80,000, $70,000, $60,000, $80,000, whatever we can find someone to do it, and consolidate those positions and take care of the administrative aspects of it for all three of those pension boards. That would save the city somewhere around $150,000 a year. I know the boards themselves, the police, fire, and general pension, would have to agree to it, but it certainly seems like that's something that we might be able to try and move the ball on. But I'd like to see us try and do that. I mean, $150,000 is nothing to sneeze at, and and I'm not sure we're getting our money's worth in terms of the value of $75,000 per administrator.
I think some of those boards get more value than others. There's no doubt about it.
Right. And coupled with that, the administrator we would have here, I don't think would be a full-time job. So obviously we could give him some other duties, so we'd even get more bang for our dollar. That would be one thing I would like to see us try to do. But I'm sure there's people here representing those pension groups, so hopefully they can bring that up to the boards and get some buy-in on that. But I think it'd be a great idea to move forward with that.
Alan is over there typing furiously. I hope you can get some information on that back to us.
Okay, very good.
Yes, sir.
And the third thing, and it was brought up tonight, I noticed myself that, and I noticed this in reviewing these reduction of fees being brought forward by developers from $4,500 down to $600, $800. I think what we're missing here in looking at those is there is an extremely, a lot more time being spent than the $528. You think about it, somebody has to prepare that presentation to this council. Somebody has to review that, which I don't believe is being factored into the, for example, the one tonight of $528. We all have to review it ourselves and decide whether it's a good move or not. So if you think about 5 of us, the city manager, the person preparing it, putting it on the agenda, it's a lot more than what we're showing. What I would like to propose, and we can do it as a recommendation or as a motion or however you want to do it, but what I'd like to see is this go to a minimum of if, for example, if the real cost associated with it is less than $2,250, which would be 50%, then we approve that as $2,250. In other words, that would be the charge. Instead of coming out with a $4,500 charge, it would be $2,250, provided it's less than 50%. If it's $1 over 50%, which would be over $2,251, then it would go to the $4,500. And that would eliminate us having to review those every week. I think it's just time consuming. I think it's a waste of our energy and time. And I think it's probably a smart move to do that, and we'd actually be getting compensated for the work that's being put into it. In addition to that, I think if somebody wants to apply and say that I'd like to get a release or some relief on the fee, even if we said it's $2,250 and they said, well, your real dollars is only $1,200 is what we're showing, I'd like to get that difference, and they wanted to come forward, there'd be a $1,000 charge to bring that forward. I think that would eliminate these from us having to see these going forward. So that would be something that I would highly recommend.
Let me play off that for just a second, because I had this in my notes. We have certain fixed costs just for turning the lights on every day, and staffing. And this is something anybody can do. If they feel like they're being overcharged for something, it doesn't matter whether you're a developer or a citizen, you have the right to address that with us. That's what we're here for.
Right.
But one of the things that this doesn't account for, and we're following the procedures and the rules as the recommendations brought to council that are established for bringing it to council the way it is right now. So that way it isn't arbitrary. But I do think it needs some updating, because it doesn't account for some of those fixed costs that we have simply for, we've got to turn the lights on every day. Alan, one of the things that I had in a playoff Jack, one of the things I had was, do we need to charge a 10% contingency on top of those things so that we account for that? I don't want to rip anybody off. If it's costing us X dollars to provide this service, we should come close to that with our charge. We shouldn't charge, if it costs us $50 to provide water and trash service to somebody's house, we should be charging them roughly $50. We shouldn't be charging them $200. And we try our best to set our rates accordingly to do that. And this shouldn't be any different. But Alan, I'd like to workshop it, and if staff could take a look at some options, including the ones that Jack just mentioned, what I just mentioned, because I think this, I'm not in the business of ripping anybody off, but at the same time, I do want to make sure that we really are, when we take a look at these, getting full cost recovery, and we need to update the way we do business every once in a while. I've said that this before. A lot of things probably need to be reviewed once every 5 years to make sure that we're current with current practices, because the way we do business has changed dramatically. And you think about the amount of paper we had to push in the 1990s to approve one building permit for one house, or one replacement roof, or whatever the case might be, and we don't do that anymore. And it's about to get even better with the implementation of ERP. But Alan, I think that this is a great example of something that we probably should workshop, bring some options back to us at that workshop that we can discuss as a council, so that we can update our policy.
Yeah, and I'm not in the business of ripping anybody off either, and that's not the intent, obviously. I think, basically but we're charging $4,500, and is that, I mean, that's a fee that we're, to amend an MDA or a PCD, it's $4,500. So a lot of folks may not know there's an option to come forward So they're paying that $4,500. So in reality, I just thought it would be closer to do the 50% at $2,250, and that would be the minimum. And then if it's over that, then the full $4,500 would be reasonable. But I agree, maybe a workshop to talk about it in more detail, because it's kind of sprung on us, and I've just noticed it 3 or 4 times since I've been here in 3 or 4 or 5 meetings. So I thought it was something that was
So
kind
we
of
went
taking up time
for a long
people.
time with nothing being built for
Right.
years, it seemed
Right.
like, and now all of a sudden, things are popping again. You're right, Jack.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Just on that note for the workshop, one of the discussions that we need to, have with that is to also realize that a lot of times these are very minor amendments. And then also, many times the amendments themselves actually are a benefit to the community. So we need to be able to have a way to weigh that out as well, because I'd hate for somebody not to bring an amendment forward in fear of having to pay a full $4,500 on a minor change or amendment that could be something that's more beneficial to the community and less impactful on those that are closest. You know what I'm saying? So I think a workshop's a great idea. And you know what? These are things that are always going to have to be workshopped, and as time goes on, things change, and the need to continually look at that. I was talking to a resident today about an unrelated thing, but somewhat similar, and talking about fee structures, and we had that very conversation that this is an always an area that's going to be constant in review and all that kind of stuff.
It's hard when
It's a
you
good
charge
point.
a one-size-fit-all fee
Yeah. It doesn't
for a
fit
certain
one- it doesn't
job
fit all.
that
Doesn't
for
fit.
one person it might take an hour's worth of work, for another person it might take 20 hours worth of work. But you've got to have a fee schedule.
Right.
But I think, if you're doing something like that, you got to go to actual cost.
Sure.
And you got to figure out what actual cost really is,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of costs that we're going through that's not really been,
Right.
factored in.
You good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Will you just help me knock out one of the 3 things I had on my list? The other, Mr. Burns talked about noise in the city and making sure that our police department has the tools that they need for enforcement. I know for a fact that there's a certain establishment on Nova Road that during certain times of the year makes a whole lot of noise and can be heard from miles away. And we have officers that will go out with a noise meter and will cite them. But he's right, that's a fixed point of origin.
Is that the one that has the car shows?
No.
Oh.
No, I won't mention the dog house by name, but I don't want to embarrass anybody, but if you can hear them quite loudly in my backyard,
Got it.
a couple miles away, and my neighbors are looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, but I think that that's a valid point, and I wanted to ask you guys, I want to make sure, first of all, that PD has the tools that they need to address it. I don't know exactly what it is. Alan, maybe you can get some answers for us, what we have and what we might need, and if we need an ordinance to improve what we have. I don't know what's on the books with state law. We might have statutes in state law. This is not an area of expertise for me, but if you could come back and let council know what we have versus what we need, and this council can have a conversation about what we can do to improve that, because these are quality of life issues, and if we can do something to improve people's qualities of life that makes sense and are reasonable, I want to make sure that we do that. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay.
I'd like to go on record, say when the state ended the inspection program years ago,
Decades.
that was decades ago, that probably was a bad thing, because mufflers were one of the things that was checked during inspection. And so.
And I have to believe that state law, just because.
It is state law for
I don't
them
know
to
that
have
that's changed,
the
but
proper.
how do you enforce that?
System, and to have a catalytic converter, but, it's against the law for a muffler shop to remove a catalytic converter, to my knowledge. So if they're doing that, then, that's not something we can control, but it is a fact that people break the law all the time.
But once it happens, what do we do about it? That's what I'm asking.
Exactly. How does it, how do you address that? You certainly can't have an officer out there following every loud car around. But there's got to be a happy medium somewhere.
Okay. And I just wanted to mention one more time, I was very, very happy that we were able to recognize Mary Whitmire for her contributions and 35 years of volunteer service. I'm like, hey, that's not just, somebody working 35 years in one job and collecting a paycheck is an incredible thing. This is volunteer service. And I think about what I was doing. Yeah, I was just a teenager running around Port Orange in 1983, 1984. This place is very different. She's seen so many changes. I just think that that's an incredible thing. And when I think about what that whole group of volunteers and police services does, I'm serious. If there are people out there listening, you want to be part of something bigger, something better, you just want to contribute a few hours a week, they would love to have you. Dwight Galt sitting out there with a half smile on his face, an application in his hand. He would love to reel you guys in, and we'd absolutely love to have you. It's a fabulous, fabulous group of people. It is one of the reasons why they contribute their contribution to what we've been named the second safest city in the state. There are many, many reasons why we got that ranking, and that's certainly one of them. And a great group of people. Anybody wants to be part of that, we'd love to have you.
Mayor, just a quick comment on that note. Saturday night I was at an event here in our community, and in reflection, listening to some of the stories, and this was an event where a lot of community members were being recognized and awarded for their volunteer service and the things they do in the community. And in reflection of that, you're absolutely right. There are so many ways to volunteer in the community, and one of the things that we kind of really felt the other night was there's a lot of things that community volunteers can do that's so much better than what government can do. Really can do it. They do it so much better, and they do it with a great sense of pride and compassion and effectiveness at it. And we are blessed to have a community that has so many organizations that are incredibly effective, and we should look for every opportunity to recognize them as much as we can. And anybody that's out there, looking for a way to get involved or serve, just contact any of us. We can point you in a lot of different directions, because there really are some great organizations, and the VIPs program is phenomenal. You're right. The things that they do, a lot of people think that they just show up sometimes and they take paper from one office to the next or from one building to the next, and that's just not even a tip of the iceberg of what these folks do. They get out there, and they're out there in the hurricanes and the storms and the fires and the disasters, and helping us at criminal events and crime scenes, and just all kinds of ways to serve. And so it's a fabulous, fabulous organization.
And it is amazing when we're out there enjoying family days, we're having a great time. They're working it to make sure things go well and that people are safe.
And they save this community a tremendous amount of money. I mean, if we had to pay for all of that, I can't even imagine.
No, don't give me any ideas.
I know. Well, we've doubled Mary Whitmire's salary twice. So
Well, they have their fun too. Dwight tried to write me a ticket the other day.
yeah, well,
Thank you. And I was going to ask you to give us an update on Raintree.
On the tree.
I think I have some good news, so I'm glad you guys stuck around. I'm going to invite the utilities director up because they were working on this problem, and I think they've found a solution that will make people happy for as long as the tree will live.
It's the indomitable Linda Stevens.
It is. Good
Lynn,
evening,
how are
Mayor,
you?
Council.
Tree master.
Lynn Stevens, Public Works Utilities Director. So we did take quite a bit of input from residents in the neighborhood. We put all the different options together. We met with the Environmental Advisory Board, and I apologize, I'm not sure how those things get promoted to the public. But with input from the Environmental Advisory Board, the final decision was the tree's going to stay. We're not removing the tree.
You just became a very popular person, you know that.
We are going to root prune the tree so that we can restore the pavement and take some of the big humps out of the roadway and make it a little safer entrance and exit. I did hear something about the sign to Raintree. The sign is not the city sign. That was something that was done by the HOA years ago, from what I understand. So not something that we, Public Works, were planning to repair or replace. But the tree is staying. We are going to, again, root prune the tree, replace the concrete, replace the pavement, and that's our plan.
Well done.
Thank you.
I'd like to express my gratitude as well. I grew up down Devon Street, right next door to Raintree, and had fond memories riding my bike through that neighborhood.
Sure.
May have egged one of your houses at some point. I was like 6 years old at the time, so I'm sure it's gotten better since. But
Best Halloween ever.
fond appreciation for that particular neighborhood.
And we'll,
Occasionally those trees are good at slowing people down too.
we'll do a better job of getting that information out to the public on the website. I'll work with Christine and we'll get it out on social media.
Please do. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Thanks.
Good job.
Special awards reports, recognition and proclamation. Item 14, General Employees Retirement Plan. Mr. David Leonard.
There, Dave. I didn't see him out there first.
He was hiding behind the VIPs.
Yep.
That's a tough act to follow. Save the tree. That's a good deal. I like trees.
Yeah, you couldn't come up at a worse time, Dave.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. Jack, I wanted to pause just a second and address your administrative expense comment, just to clarify that that's not a monolithic number that goes to one person.
Right.
I can't speak for all the pension boards, but for the general board, I can say that it covers actuary fee, which I'm fond of getting, the actual administrator of the plan, who does all the processing of the distributions and is there for the participants, legal fees, and also audit fees. So it's not just one person. It would be hard to replace now.
I'm sure they're all that way, but
I don't know. I don't know the
serve on
others.
police, and it's the same way. It's a combination of all those jobs.
And this is
And
why
that-
we
and-
ask the questions, so we get answers.
Right.
And I'm assuming regardless of who administers the plan, you still got to do an audit. You still got to do the actuarial work. So
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're not all equal in terms of the fees, but they're all being done very professionally. I see them all. So I'm here to report on the 2018 valuation report, which we finished we really finished it a couple months ago, presented it to the board in March, and first of all, it was a good year for the pension plan. I'm showing on the screen here the 2017 numbers. I'm going to flip over. We were 84% funded in the plan as of September 30th, 2017. Moved to 18, that jumped up to 89% funded. The assets and the liabilities both grew. The assets are shown here by the gray boxes on the chart, and the liabilities are by the blue. So you can see that both have been growing, but the liabilities are starting to level off. The light blue line on the graph there is the history of the funded ratio, and that has improved from the low 60% in 2009 at the beginning of the chart all the way up to 89% today. And that improvement occurred even though we've tightened up the assumptions by reducing the interest rate during that period. So that's a good sign too. 89% is a pretty good funded ratio for these kind of plans.
Respectable. Yeah.
This slide has the contribution summary and also the benefit payment summary, and they go hand in hand. It's good to look at them together. The gray boxes are the city's contributions. The blue boxes, if you can see them, are what the employees contribute to the plan. And the light blue line above, there's two lines, a yellow line and a blue line. The light blue line there are the benefit payments. So you can see the benefit payments have been on the way up, and the contributions have been on the way down. The gap has grown, but that is actually what the trust assets are for. So we keep track of the differential there, and some people tend to get concerned, but that's why we have a trust fund, and putting the money away so that when people retire, it'll be there for them. And we'll discuss the future of how the contribution bars will go a little bit further down in the presentation. This is a summary of the plan participants. The gray are the active participants in the plan, and the dark blue are the retirees. The light blue are people that terminated with vested benefits. So you can see here that the retiree dark blues have been growing and the grays have been shrinking. The yellow line on the chart is the salary base, which is what we base the contributions on, and that's also shrinking, obviously, with the number of actives. And now the plan, probably as of a half hour from now, or I don't know how that works, will be closed completely to new members, so that gray will continue to shrink. One aspect of the plan that's interesting to me anyway, this is a fairly young plan. It started in 2003. So even though there's a lot of retirees, they're actually a very young retiree group. The plan has an early retirement feature, and the average age of the retirees right now is about 67.5 years old. So that means they're going to be collecting for a long time. This slide shows the investment performance historically. The last 3 years, you can see, have been very good, double-digit returns the last 3 years. And there's two lines on there. There's a blue line and a yellow line. The blue line represents the market value return. So you can see that's kind of all over the lot, even though it's been, generally been very good. And the yellow line is something we call the valuation assets. And just a real quick, I don't want to make actuaries out of you, but
Good luck with that.
yeah, it's not my goal with any of my clients. But what we do, one of our main goals is to help the city budget it be as stable as possible with these contributions, and I know that they do vary some. And using these smooth valuations as assets is one of the ways we do it. What we do is we recognize those ups and downs of the fluctuation of market value over several years. If you look at the valuation report carefully, and I know you all did, you'll see that the trust assets that we use in our calculations is more than $2 million less than the actual market value.
Yeah.
And somebody might look at that and say, well, use the market value because we want our contributions to be less. But the idea is we're kind of saving for a rainy day, so that when you have a bad year, and 2019, you've all seen what happened in the fourth quarter of 2018. That's our first quarter for the fiscal year. When you have a bad year, it doesn't impact next year's valuation. We were able to look ahead, and even if this year the value or the market value is flat, 0%, we'll still have gains as far as the actual report's concerned, things to help keep the contribution stable. This year, through 6 months, through March 31st, the trust fund is at a loss of less than 1%, which is really pretty good considering how bad the fourth quarter was. Yeah. And this slide just shows a few composite returns. The graph's the same graph. Our 3-year composite's over 11%, 5-year 9.25, and 10 years, which is really a pretty long time in investment terms, is 8.05%. So you might say, okay, we have a 7% assumption. We're beating that assumption on a 10-year basis. That's great. What does the future hold for this plan? Since it's completely closed down to new members, the plan is going to continue to mature. And what that means is there's going to be a larger discrepancy every year between the benefits and the contributions, and the salary base will continue to shrink. Even though the assets have outperformed the 7% yield regularly, there's certain pressures to maybe decrease that assumption. When you just decrease an interest assumption, what happens is the need for contributions goes up. And a couple of reasons why we might want to consider decreasing it is that we've been, 10 years, 8%. It's been kind of a historic bull market, and there's obviously signs that may be over. But maybe a bigger reason is that our cash flow needs, and our investment advisor has told us this, the cash flow needs dictate a more conservative portfolio, meaning less risk and probably lower returns. So the question is, should we reduce the 7% interest? And we've been talking about it, and we'll see what comes of that. We might wait to do it. We might see how the markets go. I did do some searching, and a nationwide study of public retirement plans shows that having a 7% assumption is kind of in the lower third. The median across the country is 7.28, so we're below that. State of Florida has an annual survey that they publish, and 334 out of 485 municipals in Florida have higher than 7%. So obviously we've already taken some steps to be conservative with that. But being wrong with the pack is not really our goal. We want to try and do it right. So we'll keep our eyes open and see what happens. What we don't want to do is pass the burden of an underfunded plan onto the future generations. So that's what we're always looking out for.
This is the board you're on? This is your board.
Councilman Stiltner, yep.
Scott, why don't we start with you?
I think he did a great job explaining all that. That's what he's there for. So, as far as the board itself, I'll just say that I think there's some great cohesion on there, and the folks that the board has hired to manage these funds and do these reports have done a great job for us. And the recovery of the plan over the last few years has trended in the right direction. So that's been a relief to see. And but I think the assumed rate of returns are where my caution and my concerns are. If you go back 25 years ago, everybody in the state was looking for 8.5%, some places even higher for returns. Those are just unrealistic, and you can look at these things in 5-year increments or 20-year increments, or however. I'd like to look at them more so in 20-year. 10 years a great snapshot, but these things take a long time, and they got to be there sustainable for a really, really long time. And I think that assumed rate of return is a topic of discussion that this council and future councils will need to continue to look at. The state has continued to trend down with their assumed rate of returns, right? On the FRS plan, we're at what,
Right.
7.25 now?
They're around there.
Around there,
730
yeah.
or
So,
something.
I think we've done the right thing incrementally, bringing those assumed rate of returns down to the benefit of the plans and the sustainability for sure.
And the assumed interest rate is really the most important assumption.
Right.
One of the things the state of Florida has us do some separate calculations, and we have to file those. And I actually did them today at a 5%. What if we assumed 5%? Well, the cost of the plan would go from 23% of pay to 50% of pay. So, for that 2% job. In our business, a 2% change in interest rates is considered really drastic. But, what if we had to go to 5%?
This is probably, statistically speaking, the best performing of the three plans as far as history, and also, at our funding status and the like. And this is the one where, percentage-wise, we're making the least percentage contribution to per employee. And there's a lot of good news out of this, but I would challenge the board to continue asking the right questions, because and staying on top of that, because making a bad thing good is good, but keeping a good thing and making it great, sometimes that's even harder.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for, is excellence. Drew?
Yeah, Dave, the 10-year, the 3, 5, and 10-year number, was that net, or was that net of fees?
I believe it's net of administrative fees, but not investment fees.
No, yeah, well, of course, yeah, but the other, okay, so, yeah, and then you have a plan, well, in 18 it was 89%, I would imagine with the .67 loss, we're probably, I'm guessing 83 or 84%? I mean,
yeah.
I know it took a hit, but it probably wasn't a tremendous.
It's not going to be a tremendous hit.
Okay.
Now that particular measure is on the market value. It's
Yeah.
not on the smooth.
yeah, so
it's going to take a hit from a market
Yeah.
value.
So,
and when it earns 0, that doesn't mean it's going to hold steady, because we're assuming it's going to earn 7.
Yeah, correct. And a lot of people have that 80% funded ratio as a healthy plan, and we're
Mhm.
still above that. So the plan is a good one, obviously. All the plans have shown great improvement since 2010 in the funded ratio. It's not just this one; they've all gone up, and so it's encouraging. But you have to be able to. You have to be prepared for when when the market crashes or takes a hit.
Mhm.
We're going to have those downs. We're enjoying a lot of ups right now. We ahead of us could be plenty of downs, and the plans are prepared for that. So. Appreciate it, Dave.
You mean it's not a straight line up
I,
forever?
I wish, I wish.
Chase?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to see where we're at. Scott hit it well. I was gonna remark the same thing about our assumed rate, and I appreciated that direction last year. I mean, I'm always gonna wanna err on the side of a conservative, valuation, even if it means more out of pocket, from us. So, I'll appreciate that, that continued guidance and direction. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jack?
Yeah, thank you, David. Just addressing the administrative fee, I think there's a fee for each actuary, for the administrator, for the auditors, right? So there's 3 fees, so I guess we'd have to look at those individually to see what
Right.
savings there. So, but regarding the funding of the unfunded liability, and maybe you can shine some light on it. I always looked at it as there an advantage to, I don't like debt, number one, but is there a way to look at that from a bonding standpoint? Would there be a savings in that if you bonded that unfunded liability and got away from that?
That would be something that you'd need some analysis, but assuming you could bond at a lower interest rate, obviously we're assuming 7. I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to compare to, say you could issue a bond at 3 or 4. It would just have to be a kind of a financial analysis by the city to see if they would rather do that. Because you can bring it to 100% funded, but then what's it going to be next year? So, you know.
I just know it's a big number, so when you're looking at that much money, you want to see if there's, I mean, 0.5% would make a huge difference.
Right.
So, you know, 1% would be gigantic. So,
Right.
just something to look at, think about. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, David.
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you coming every year. This has been a point of emphasis with all our pension boards, and the fact that you guys are willing to spend a little time with us to make sure that we have a comfort level with a whole lot of data. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, we try and break it down and make it understandable. That's one of the best parts of the job.
You did a good job. Thank you.
Board appointments, interviews, reports. Item 15, Citizen Advisory Committee for the TPO. I was going to say, I know I saw Bobby Ball somewhere.
Bobby Ball with the CAC for the TPO. We had our monthly meeting this week, or today actually, and the agenda was pretty short, so I'll be brief. But the one thing I wanted to mention is something we've talked about before up here, which is the PD&E study going on for the interchange at Pioneer Trail and 95. There is a public workshop meeting on April 30th at 5:30 at the Brandon Center in New Smyrna. So that's really for you and everybody behind me. And with that, actually they did give the presentation today, the PD&E study itself, a brief one. And there are 3 options, alternatives for the on and off ramps. So if you get an opportunity, it might be good to take a look at those. I'm sure it's available online in the TPO's website as well.
Questions for Bobby?
I'm happy to see movement on this.
I think they showed us 4 or 5 options. They've narrowed it down to 3. Is that because of land acquisition plans?
Probably through the process of the PD&E, yeah.
So some of those options look
Could
like
be environmental.
the acquisition and the environmental impacts could be much more significant. So
Right.
maybe they whittled that down.
Any other questions? That it?
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
That was an easy one for you.
Try sometimes.
Swift and painless.
You got all these numbers talking going on.
Item 16, Environmental Advisory Board appointments. We have 2 openings. Just wanted to let council know of the 5 applicants that we have to choose from. I got a call this morning from Joe Fazzi, and Joe said that it has been very difficult for him since taking a new job to show up, and that he is withdrawing his name. He does it with trepidation because he enjoys doing it, but right now he feels like he needs to take a step back because his personal situation's changed, and would certainly like to be considered later on in the future when things change for him. But I thanked him for his service, and I appreciated him reaching out to me and letting me know. So that takes us down to 4 names. We have 2 openings. At this point, any of the nominees, or I'm sorry, we don't have nominees yet. Before we accept any nominations, the people who have applied, Christina Berry, Michael Anderson, Michael Arminio, and Jonathan Foley, if anyone of them would like to come and address us in advance and tell us why you'd like to do this. Otherwise, council will continue to deliberate and make nominations.
Are any here?
At this point in time, where the
I think
floor is...
we have one.
Yeah,
I
come
think
on
we
up.
have,
Mike?
Good evening, Board, Ms. Roberts. My name is Michael Anderson, and I volunteered for the Environmental Advisory Board. A little bit about myself: I'm from Ocala, Florida, born and raised. Left there to join the military, the Navy, 4-year vet. Got out of the Navy, went to the University of Florida, obtained a bachelor's in agricultural and environmental engineering with a specialization in water resources conservation. Got out of college and got my license as a civil engineer and worked very many projects over my career since 2001. I've done a lot of DRIs, commercial development, residential development, subdivisions, and I volunteered for the Palm Coast Planning and Land Development Regulation Board in the mid-2000s. While I was there, I helped them write and implement their first Unified Land Development Code, and served there until I moved away from Palm Coast. I am one of your former community development engineers from 2012 to 2014. Matt Jones and I wrote the Land Development Code for your floodplain compensating storage requirements, and we got that implemented by the board. And I'm also a licensed contractor, so I've seen a lot of development throughout my career from both sides, or from all three sides of the spectrum: the design, the regulation side, and the construction side. With my specialization in water resources, I see that Port Orange is unique, and they have a unique resource here, being the water resources they have. I've taken a particular interest in Spruce Creek. I live down in Riverwood, and I've experienced pretty serious situations going through the railroad trestles in my boat, and I've done some significant damage. Over the last month and a half or so, I've probably gotten a lot farther with trying to get to some sort of solution to that project than certain public groups, that are organized trying to work on that project. So I think with my qualifications and experience and connections, the marketing, the networking I've done throughout my career, I would be an asset to Port Orange on the Environmental Advisory Board, and try to help do what's right with sustainable development.
Any questions of council for Michael before? Well, we have him up here.
No questions, but thank you for your service.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you, Mike.
Any other candidates here for that position? There being none? Ah, he's hiding over in the corner. Tell us who you are and why you think you're qualified.
Yeah, Mayor, City Council, City staff. My name is Jonathan Foley, and for those who don't know, I've lived in Port Orange for 23 years. I've grown up alongside this town, and my interest in being on the EAB comes from wanting to see a little bit of balance when it comes to measures. I think it's important that we work hand in hand to take care of our environment, take care of what we've been blessed with here in terms of our city, while also making sure we don't overstep when it comes to regulation that we put on businesses. So I have concerns about that, and I would like to lend my voice and offer to volunteer to be a part of this. I'm kind of a active person. I like to get out and I like to shake hands and meet people. I attended the EAB meeting recently about the rain tree situation, and I took it upon myself just as a citizen to meet a handful of residents and kind of discuss it with them. And that's my approach to anything I get involved in. I like to be active, and I like to make sure that I'm actually going out and meeting with the people who we're affecting. So I appreciate your consideration and your time, and I hope you'll consider me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other applicants here? Did I get everybody who's present? Okay.
Is there a, I'm curious as to, is there, as to why some of the others are not here? Has there been an explanation? And I'm just curious as to, if anybody been informed?
All of them were invited.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd just like to know that.
Sometimes you just don't know the answer to that. Because they're not here to give you that answer.
No.
With that, we have 2 positions, council. Nominations are now open.
Should we nominate one at a time or two?
I'm going to take all the nominations that you have. If you have 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, I'll start.
Doesn't matter.
Being present, oh, go ahead.
I'd like to
ballot them all at once.
We have two people here for 2 positions, 4 applicants total. I'd like to nominate Jonathan Foley to serve for one of the positions.
Second.
We have a nomination for Mr. Jonathan Foley.
I'll nominate Michael for the
Michael Anderson.
Anderson for the second position.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any other nominations? One last call. Any other nominations? Nominations are now closed. We have 2 nominees for 2 positions. So there is no need for a paper ballot. All in favor signify by saying, no, you know what? Let's do a voice vote on each one of them. Let's do a voice vote, yay or nay, on the appointment of Mr. Michael Anderson.
If the city clerk could take over at this
If
point.
we only
clerk could call the roll before I really spoil this thing.
Councilman Wiles.
Which one is this?
Which one is this for?
Michael Anderson.
Michael Anderson.
I'm going alphabetical.
All right, yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Silver.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. And for the nomination of Mr. Jonathan Foley.
Councilman Wiles.
Yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Silver.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
No. Doesn't matter, you all outnumbered me.
That's right.
Wait till these people find out how much the pay is for this
They
volunteer
already
position.
know.
Next year we'll double their pay. Appreciate that. Public hearing, item 17. Second reading of ordinance number 2019-6. An ordinance. Ordinance number 2019-6 is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 54, Article 6, relating to the 2003 General Employees Retirement System, amending the Code Sections 54-147 and 54-162, providing for pension participation and contributions pursuant to plan documents for each 401A and 457 plan, providing for codification, providing for conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for a providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2019-6.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Would anybody here care to speak to this? There being none, council comments?
No comment.
There being none, call the roll, please.
Councilman Wiles.
Yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Silver.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. That brings us to, you know what? And Dave Leonard said it'd take us half an hour to get to that. Boy, was he wrong. Second reading of ordinance number 2019-14. It's the second reading of the First Amendment to the Catfish Commons Plan Commercial Development Master Development Plan. Ordinance number 2019-14 is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, approving the First Amendment to the Master Development Agreement for Catfish Commons Plan Commercial Development and Conceptual Development Plan for approximately plus or minus 1.53 acres, generally located at 4085 Ridgewood Avenue and 4108 Halifax Drive, providing for conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date.
Motion to approve ordinance number 2019-14.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. The item is on the floor. Second reading. Would anyone here care to speak to this? Come on up, Robert.
Mayor, council members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 North Dexter Drive. Sorry. I went back and I reread the exhibits, and one thing that I still don't understand, and which I did not hear any comments on it the last time, had to do with the conceptual development plan. In this Exhibit 1, the First Amendment, it replaces the Exhibit B with a new Exhibit B, and I have copies of the Exhibit B. The original Exhibit B shows a future events lawn where there currently is a restaurant. Now, the second one does not, still shows the restaurant, does not show the events lawn. So I don't know if they dropped it out of the thing, out of the program or not, because it's still, when you read the words, it still talks about the event lawn and all the events such as the farmers markets and the races and things that'll be done there. So I think it needs to be clarified whether the event lawn is still in or it has dropped out with the new exhibit. Another thing that is of concern is the setbacks, the building setbacks from the roadway. A couple of them were reduced from 10 feet to 5 feet, and I heard no discussion about that. And I'm sort of concerned, about the 5 feet. It doesn't seem like very much setback. And then the other thing that of concern had to do with the floating dock. Again, it talks about providing 35 spaces, and then the amendment changes it down to 29 spaces to be available for the floating dock. No comments about why that was done or whether you really want to do that. And then the final thing of concern has to do with the waiver of future city submittal fees. I would strongly recommend against that. I just generally object to waivers of fees, and this is a CRA as far as I understand. It's a redevelopment area, so there should be plenty of built-in incentives to get somebody to expand and to offer a fee reduction as an additional incentive, I think is going overboard. And if it's a good idea to do it, then it should be built into the CRA structure and not a separate thing. So my 3 minutes are up. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert. Anyone else care to speak to this? There being none, back to council. Questions? Scott?
No.
Drew?
No, this is second reading, I'm good.
Chase?
Good.
Jack?
No, I'm good.
Okay. In that case, call the roll.
Councilman Wiles.
Yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Okay, 5-0. I was gonna make you sweat for just a second. Thank you. Good luck with it. That brings us to item 19. Item 19 is second reading of ordinance number 2019-15. An ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 9, relating to updating requirements for the tree survey and tree mitigation payment requirements, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Motion to approve ordinance number 2019-15.
I'll second.
We have a motion to second. This is second reading. Generally speaking, there aren't a lot of comments on second reading, but because there are a lot of people here that are interested in the subject, Alan, could we have somebody just give a quick recap of what this is accomplishing?
See, this is how good we are. I don't even have to ask.
Good evening, Penelope Cruz, Planning. So back in July of last year, the Environmental Advisory Board had a series of recommendations for amendments they thought were needed to the Land Development Code, Chapter 9 and Chapter 13 with regards to tree preservation and landscaping. Those recommendations were brought before the City Council in October in a workshop, and staff was directed to move forward with the set of amendments. So the amendments are being brought forward in a series. This is part 2. Back in February, we finished part 1, which dealt with some things with landscaping on smaller lots in Chapter 13. This is part 2 of the amendment. This is Chapter 9 of the Land Development Code with regards to tree preservation. This part 2 addresses basically 2 things: tree mitigation and tree surveys. The first item basically just increases the amount of mitigation that would be required. It doesn't change the tree preservation requirements, but it does require more trees to be mitigated for. So the code currently has a certain standard for how many trees are required to be saved on a property when it's being developed. That doesn't change, but what it does do is it states now that you can still remove the same number of trees, however, you have to mitigate for all of them, whether that be through the mitigation bank or through tree replacement. So it's kind of like an encouragement to try to preserve more existing trees rather than replanting. The second piece of it is with regards to tree surveys. There was 2 standards in our code, one for site plans and one for subdivisions, and it constantly caused confusion with the development community because we wouldn't get the right survey for the right application. So it just clarified it and simplified it and made it one standard. To be able to get the majority, more data than what one of them was requiring, so that we can capture all the data on trees and make sure everything's properly mitigated. So that's what this amendment is about.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I know for my part, this is Tree City USA, Arbor Day Foundation, 30 years running. I know from a practical standpoint, we can't save every tree. That we're just being practical. I also know that when people have property rights for something that's been zoned, that something's going to be developed there based on the zoning, and there's not much we can do that because people have property rights, whether it be residential or business.
Yep.
And certainly there is zoning in place to make sure those are developed accordingly. But I like to think being Tree City USA means is that we have a higher standard towards encouraging saving as many of those trees as is possible. I like to think that part of the reason that Port Orange is a special place is because sometimes we're a pain to deal with, but it's because we have higher standards. And we try to preserve as much as that for our community as is possible. I remember when Wawa, I call it Wawa East, came before us, we held firm on some of the requests they had on historic trees on that property. And they still have a nice shade canopy today with trees that in a lot of cities, they would have been allowed to remove them entirely.
Minus one that was a victim of the hurricane.
Yeah, well, that's nature.
Yep.
We can't control nature. But I like to think that we do the best we possibly can within the law to promote tree preservation and promote a higher standard of living in the city of Port Orange, as with what makes sense. We're being anti-everything doesn't make sense, but we do want to strike a balanced community. And that's not easy to do sometimes. I struggle with it, I admit, but this is one of those things that you do. And I also wanted to thank the Environmental Advisory Board for taking on this issue. This is not easy. When we have boards that serve this city, those are volunteers. Hopefully, we appoint with certain expertise that we can rely on. It's impossible for us up here to have expertise in everything. So we rely on our volunteer boards to give us good feedback, and they work very hard on this one to bring it forward. And John, I just wanted to thank you and your board for the work that you've done here. Before we go to the floor, any opening comments, council?
I'll just to give a different perspective. I don't support this, but I want to explain why. And that's what I love about this council. We can all agree to disagree, and it's always respectfully done.
With this too much.
It's usually respectfully done.
Usually.
But I appreciate the intent behind this this ordinance. But one of my favorite quotes by Friedman is, one of the great mistakes is to judge a policy or program based on the intent rather than the results. And I think it's measures like these at times. I look at it as to why home rule is really under attack by the state. By that I mean the state passes a lot of laws that, a lot of legislation that preempts localities from making decisions, and I think it's measures like these. The intent is very noble, it's valid, and I appreciate it. Where I get caught up is mandating it on the businesses in order to forcing them to contribute to this bank. That's my whole issue with it, and I wrestle with it just as the mayor and many others do. But that's just I wanted to put that out there, the opposite perspective of that.
Jack?
Just kind of along the same lines as Chase, I think I think we have a program in place now with the city that was why we are the tree city. We have good, good policy on preserving trees wherever possible. I don't really see this as much of saving trees. Those people are going to probably remove those trees. What it's going to do though is put an additional burden on those people wanting to improve their properties or develop something. So I just don't see it getting the result that we're hoping for, other than maybe adding a little bit of money to our coffers, but not much. Other than that, I mean, again, I appreciate all the environmental board does to come up with ideas and suggestions, and I think a part of this is the survey, trying to consolidate those things too. I think they did a good job in reviewing it as
that was a very good part of this.
totality. Yeah. So just commend them for their work on it. But I kind of lean the way Chase is referring to here on this particular one. Thank you.
Anyone out there want to speak to this issue? Public? It's a Paul Rosar sighting. Come on up, Paul.
Thanks, sir. Gentlemen, Paul Rosar, 607 Powers Avenue, Port Orange, Florida. This thing about the trees, we are tree friendly. And not to point out any gentleman.
Of course not.
As we talk, because we can't agree to disagree. I've seen a major lot not too far from me, the trees totally destroyed and come down. And there seems to be a large wind effect now that those trees are gone in my neighborhood. These large trees have an effect on our environment. And we need to look really strongly. And I'm glad this young lady over here who, I'm looking right at you, from the water department. I'm so glad that you took care of keeping that one big tree going. And you remember when I stated that in our meeting. You cannot allow people to arbitrarily take these trees down. And I'm disagreeing with you and disagreeing with Mr. Wiles on your last time you're up here.
Maybe.
As of right now. It's just not right to arbitrarily take down large trees. I lost 22 on my lot. A lot of them were palm trees. But I also lost other trees, and it hurt me as I drug out the remains out to the road during the hurricanes. So what I'm trying to say is, please keep the restrictions in process, that are in process, and please take care of our trees. You have the birds in the trees. you have animals, your raccoons and whatever that live inside a lot of the big oak trees. We have to maintain this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Got it down to a point there.
Anyone else care to speak to this?
I just want to ask a quick question of legal.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Would anyone else care to speak to this? I want to make sure we come back. Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's back to us.
Yeah, I saw there was no one.
See, I'm making sure.
Yeah. Just a quick question from a legal standpoint. This applies to every current property that people already own. It'll go into effect right away from any development that happens right now. My question is, I know we have legal issues if we change a zoning on somebody's property. Adding a new ordinance like this wouldn't give us any legal issues going forward, correct?
There's always a possibility of a legal contest, but I'm going to defer to Penny to give you the full picture on this, because Penny knows those consequences and also knows this proposed ordinance the
Okay,
best.
you know what I'm asking about,
mhm.
right? Okay.
Penelope Cruz Planning. So this would apply to non-residential development, non-residential multifamily, not single-family homes and things. Any new development that would come in for review at this point, once this goes into effect, if it's approved tonight. So it's not retroactive. Once something's already developed, up and running, you don't go back and try to mitigate anything.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Anything else? That's it, Mayor.
I think the main thing, and just to clarify, we really aren't asking, I don't think, by saying no to this, for any less trees than what's required by our Tree City ordinances now. It's just that if there's any in the buffer that they want to take out and still meet the requirement, there's a dollar value for those trees that would go into a tree bank. So really, it's only a monetary expense to the developer if they wanted to take those trees out. That's the only difference here. As long as everybody understands it's not, and the monetary expense is enticing them to keep the trees in that landscape buffer.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Mayor, this is not an ordinance that allows for anybody to arbitrarily remove trees.
Absolutely. You still
Nor
need a tree
was the previous ordinance.
Right.
And also, I don't believe it's gonna require a payment. They have an option of
Leaving the tree.
leaving the tree or placing trees elsewhere on the property.
Or replanting.
Or replanting or paying in. So it's not,
Right.
they're not being fined, they're given an option. Because right now, they could take the trees down and nothing would happen, but
Well,
with this, they could still take the same amount of trees down, but it would require a payment or trees to be replanted elsewhere on the property.
Or pay.
But but there is a
Either or.
choice.
Either
Right.
or. Any other comments? None? Call the roll.
Councilman Miles,
No.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont.
No.
Mayor Burnett.
I love it when you guys do this too. Yes, 3-2. Brings us to second reading of ordinance number 2019-16, the Fifth Amendment of the Westport Storage Office Park PCD Master Development Agreement, which is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, approving the Fifth Amendment to the Master Development Agreement for Westport Storage and Office Park Plan, Commercial Development PCD, and Conceptual Development Plan for approximately plus or minus 12.432 acres, generally located at 1415 to 5889, 5895, and 5898 Williamson Boulevard, provided for conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date.
Motion to approve ordinance number 2019-16.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second reading. Comments, questions, council?
Yeah, this is second reading now.
Anyone here care to speak to this item? There being none, last bite of the apple. I see nobody. Call the roll.
Councilman Miles.
Yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tremont.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. And at this point, before we get into the audit report from our auditor, I'd like to declare a 10-minute recess. And we stand in recess for the next 10 minutes. We're back.
Yeah, back. All right.
Brings us
fun
to the
begins.
audit report, 2018 CAFR. Who are you, sir?
Good evening, Zach Shalafor, partner, James Moore and Company. So we are here to discuss the annual audit for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2018. First and foremost, thank you to the council for the opportunity to continue working with the city. Always exciting to just be a part of the process, auditing our hometown for myself, pretty much the entire audit team and many members of the firm. Also have Doug Gillikin, manager on the audit, back in the corner, and also want to send a large appreciation as well to city staff and the finance department for all of their hard work, obviously in an especially challenging year for them, given the circumstances going through the audit and the closeout process.
Zach, I was under the impression you weren't going to be here, and I was kind of looking forward to Doug.
I appreciate it. I appreciate him leaving Doug in the corner.
Well, we can go through it, and then we can have Doug do it too. I mean, the chamber's kind of emptied out, so we might be able to get a few more.
Are you done yet? Let's go. What's going on?
All right. So these are management's financial statements. We do have 5 reports that we issue as part of the audit. The first report is our audit report on the financials, where we did issue an unmodified opinion that the city's financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. This is the best opinion that we can issue in performing your audit. We also issued a single audit report and performed a federal single audit, basically taking a more in-depth look at some of your federal grant expenditures based on the city going over a threshold. We have to perform this work when the city spends more than $750,000 of either federal or state monies. So you did exceed the threshold on the federal grant side this year. We also issue a report on internal control and compliance over financial reporting, where if we come across any internal control or compliance matters, those would be reported here. We did report one significant deficiency related to year-end capital asset closeout adjustments. Really the highlight here is nothing from a budgetary standpoint or really operational was not done properly. It was just some of the year-end reconciliations purely for the financial statements. No, again, no
What
budget.
you're talking about is a booking issue.
Correct.
Okay.
As it relates to these statements, nothing in the budget or actually what was in and out of the system on a day-to-day basis.
There's nothing missing. There's nothing unaccounted for. It was accounted for in an incorrect category, basically, is what you're saying?
Correct. And basically, we had an adjustment to true that up for purposes
Okay.
of the statements.
All right. Because when we say significant, that deserves the scrutiny that you're getting right now. Just want to make sure that we're talking about what we're talking about here.
For sure.
We're not talking about malfeasance or misfeasance.
Correct.
Where we have something missing and we need to go hunting for it. That's not the case.
Absolutely correct,
Okay.
yes. And just kind of for perspective, there are 2 levels of internal control deficiencies that could be reported. A significant deficiency is the lower level. The more severe would be called a material weakness. And that even isn't necessarily that something bad or there was any malfeasance even in that scenario. It would just be there would be conditions that present a much greater risk of any such situation happening. The significant deficiency is a much lower threshold in terms of ultimately it was just because we had the audit adjustment as part of those year-end reconciliations. The fourth report is a management letter required by the Auditor General. This addresses a series of other items. First and foremost, there's a financial condition element to this where we have to look at the city's financial condition, benchmark you all against other similar cities based on a state-generated template. If there were any issues here, we would have to report those. There were no such issues. We also report any other recommendations, observations, or comments here, not deficiencies, just kind of thoughts of, hey, here's something to consider. We did have one other recommendation in there related to time cards, and also we have to follow up on any prior year comments or recommendations. So that's always very notable in terms of, okay, what actions have been taken to follow up on anything that we brought to your attention last year. We did have 3 comments in the prior year. All of those were taken care of or corrected this year. And then our final report is an examination report, again, required by the state, where we have to look at the city's compliance with state statutes over investments and investment policies. And in this report, we did say that the city was in compliance with those specified statutes. Other separate audits, there was some discussion of the pension plans. We do audit the police and the general plans. We also perform some more detailed testing on a separate audit related to the golf course management agreement. Just to highlight those, we had no comments or deficiencies to report in those separate audits this year. To look at the numbers a little bit, we've got here the general fund broken out for the 3 past years. Again, primarily the general fund is the primary operating fund of the city. While there are other funds, the other funds generally have very specific restricted monies going into those funds or otherwise designated for a very specific purpose. As the general operating fund of the city, your fund balance, or really your reserves or retained earnings as the private sector terminology, is broken down into a few different categories. Non-spendable monies, those are those where you've already spent the cash on prepaids or inventory, so you can't go use that money for a different purpose. Restricted monies, those are where the external source of those monies restricts them to be used for a very specific purpose. So you can't go use those for whatever you want or change the intended use of those monies. Committed, there were no committed revenues or fund balance in the general fund as of this year. That would be kind of an internal restriction. So for instance, the tree ordinance that you all just discussed, any revenues and net revenues from that, those fees, those would qualify as committed in future years if there was a residual balance. But there were none in the general fund this year. And then the assigned and unassigned bucket, those are kind of your unrestricted monies. Within those two, the assigned is effectively saying it's earmarked. So those two are kind of what we look at and combine when we say, okay, what is available in unrestricted resources as of the end of the fiscal year? And you can see on this trend, there's been a decrease the past 3 years, both in total and if you combine those assigned and unassigned buckets. The main reason for that relates back to the hurricanes. All of your Hurricane Irma expenditures that took place in fiscal year 17 and 18, those have obviously been reflected. That cash was expended, but due to the timing of those grant agreements and the process with getting those reimbursements, none of the revenue or expected reimbursements has been recorded yet. So hopefully some of that deficit, or kind of not deficit, but decrease the last couple of years should be made up once those reimbursements are ultimately settled.
I was saving a question for the end, but I might as well ask it now since you addressed that with the hurricanes. Our reserves, are those cash reserves, or are we sitting on an accounts payable, or I'm sorry, an accounts receivable, where we're still waiting on hurricane money? So our reserves, are they all cash?
Mostly cash, yes. I mean, there's some small timing differences, just normal receivables and payables, but not any significant amount of the amount reflected here is in receivable form.
Because basically what I'm asking is, are our reserves actual liquid cash, or are we still sitting on a piece of paper that says the federal government owes us money?
For sure. There is a little bit owed. Most of it is cash. To kind of put into perspective, this year you had about $13.5 million in cash relative to the 16.2. So it's a little bit short. Most of that, there's some amounts that were just due from other
It's
funds.
a lot better than last year, though.
Yeah, but there is some that was due from other funds, and also just normal receivables in terms of sales taxes on other state revenues that take a couple of months to get in versus when they were earned.
Okay.
So looking at the fund balance, and again, looking at your assigned plus your unassigned fund balance relative to your annual budget, there's a recommendation out there from the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, and they're the ones who issue the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, which the city did receive on the 2017 CAFR. And the GFOA recommends that looking at your assigned plus your unassigned general fund balance, that you have a bare minimum of 2 months in reserves relative to your operating budget. 2 months, about 17%. A number of years back, the council did set an internal policy or a target of 30 to 35% under this measurement. As of the end of the year, you're about 39%, so pretty much right in line with that target. Again, whenever we look at this recommendation, we always emphasize this is a bare minimum recommendation when you factor in being a more or less coastal community where we've seen hurricanes. It doesn't take much to have to one storm and you've got to find the cash to get
Especially
through.
when
and
we know we've had neighboring cities in our county that had to borrow money because
Absolutely.
of those hurricanes.
Yeah.
Looking at some of your other funds on your business type funds, so water and sewer, solid waste, stormwater, and the golf course. What we look at here is your unrestricted net position, very much a similar measurement as we had for your general fund. And kind of look at this to look at the trends and see if there's any major negative trends or anything potentially indicative of a fee that's not being charged at a high enough level or anything like that where a fund is struggling. All of your water and sewer, solid waste, stormwater, all either flat or trending in an upward direction. The notable changes in 2018 from 2017 is the golf course deficit was cut about in half and your internal service funds reduced by about $2 million. This was primarily due to the forgiveness of the loan from the loan pool fund to the golf course fund that was approved by the council early in the fiscal year. To talk a little bit more about pensions, of course, you heard earlier on the general plan some of the highlights there. This is year 4 or year 5, I believe, that we have been recording the unfunded pension liabilities. Those show up on your financial statements. The bulk of that shows up in the governmental activities column and looking at the very first statement in the CAFR. But this $34 million liability, about $32 million shows up related to all of police, all of fire, much of the general employees plan. Ultimately, they're general fund employees, so it shows up as a governmental activities obligation. There is about $2 million of your general employees plan that gets allocated to your proprietary funds, primarily the water and sewer fund, and does show up there. A couple of different trends just to look at. All of your plans moving in the right direction the last couple of years. Both in terms of that unfunded liability coming down from about 40 million to 34 million, as well as your funded percentages increasing from about 5 to 8 or 9% across the board for all 3 plans. These are all, of course, a market value measurement that gets recorded in these financial statements, so it's a little bit different than what's used for funding purposes when they smooth some of the investment returns to not take all of the hit in one year, where for financial reporting, if there's a really good year, really bad year, that will all be reflected at that point in time. I know there was some talk about the discount rates where generals come down. I know both the police and fire plans have been working to trend those numbers down as well, just because the lower the discount rate, ultimately there is more of a contribution now, but it reduces the risk and exposure of any liability being pushed into the future if those investment returns that are being projected are not hit. That really covers the highlights of what I have, so if there's any other questions, more than glad to answer them, and thanks again for the time.
So all the times that I interrupted you doesn't preclude me from asking more questions, so be careful.
All right.
Let's start with Scott.
This is exactly why we have an audit, and I appreciate the work that goes into it, not only with your team but the city staff, and this provides a great deal of confidence and comfort every year, knowing that we have this process and we have this opportunity to double and triple check things, and to make sure that if there's clerical adjustments that need to be made or bookkeeping records that need to be tightened up or anything like that at all, that this is the process, and it's a good feeling. It almost would be somewhat, well, it would be great, almost a little bit less confident if you came back and said, we don't see anything at all, you know.
Yeah,
so I appreciate the work that goes into it. I appreciate the city finance department for sure and all the work they put in. It is a demonstrative job running the finance of a municipality of this size, and it's I'm sure it's quite the task to audit one as well. But it's a great deal of comfort and confidence to have an audit like this every year that's so intense and covers a lot of the things that we need to be able to have that confidence in. So I appreciate the job with it, and we obviously met and went through some of the details as well. So I appreciate the time you guys made to do that with me.
True.
Yeah, I'd agree. There is a level of comfort when we have that exterior set of eyes, looking at us and reviewing it every year and doing things in depth. Also like to point out that the 145 some odd page CAFR anybody that would like to review it, it is available online for your reading pleasure.
And we got it posted already? Did we get it posted, Alan?
Is it on the finance page yet? I can check in a couple of minutes.
Not
and let you know
Yeah,
in
if
a
not,
second.
if not, I mean,
If you
last
would-
year's was, but this one,
Yeah.
as soon as we approve, I mean,
I was
it'll be
gonna
on
ask
there,
that it
but.
be posted
Yeah,
immediately
yeah,
if it's not
they're
already.
available for anybody that wants to see it, so, you know, it's tough for somebody to sit out here and glance at that and they're overwhelmed, but if you wanted to spend more time on it, hours and hours, it's available for you to do that. But yeah, the news is good. We're in a good position financially. We still are owed some money from the government, I get that, but if, you know, God forbid another hurricane or something major happens, we can take care of ourselves without having to borrow money from somebody to do that and have to, you know, go through that red tape and then pay that money back. So, you know, our financial picture is good, and you know, things are going well.
Chase?
I have no comments. I appreciate the work you guys put in. I appreciate spending time the other day. You guys do a great job.
Jack?
Just in preparation for a workshop that we may have later, I'd asked a question about administrative fees. Do other cities seem to do that in-house?
Most comparably, kind of large cities in your
Yeah.
size, Ormond Beach, DeLand, kind of being two that are similar. They have an internal, but kind of in the HR department, they have really a pension administrator that handles a lot of kind of the just overall administrative oversight of the plans.
Okay. And the other question I briefly touched on was unfunded liabilities versus, you know, like bonding that. Do you see any, do you see savings in doing that?
Again, it's one that you would have to run the numbers from just kind of a gut feel, so to speak. We haven't seen much in terms of that being the road anyone has gone down. I know the city of Jacksonville either did something or had looked at it, but they had a major crisis where their plans were 40% or something funded. So
I see nice reductions on this one, so it looks like it's, you know, well managed. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're making progress each and every year, so.
Yeah, and ultimately that there's so many moving pieces that really the key is that you've got, I think, the reasonable, attainable assumptions in place and making the required contributions. There's been some years as well. I know this year, for instance, the police plan, there was an extra $60,000 or $90,000 contributed there. Basically, the estimates based on a percent of payroll are a little bit different. So some of the excess that had been paid in versus what the requirement was, that was kept in the plan to kind of help pre-fund it to a degree and get some extra money in there. So there have been some steps taken over the years to, at a bare minimum, fund what's required, but sometimes also keep a little bit of extra money in the plan if it worked out that more cash had been put in than was ultimately required.
Gotcha. All right, very good. Thank you, Zach.
Zach, appreciate it. Before you leave, could Dr. Scott come up for just a second, please? We've got a very important question for him.
And as he's coming up, just as a point, usually I don't think most cities will post this kind of stuff until it's approved and reviewed by the council.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's not on the site yet, but and I know I think we're waiting on Jake's signature for the front letter that will go into the final draft. He's out of town, so if we don't get him to sign it soon, we'll put up a draft, and then once that's in there, we'll put up the final.
Okay, so we
Yeah,
get the
well, the
draft.
most up-to-date one, I mean, last year's is on there, and
It is, yeah.
that's the current one we have to go by until this one gets posted, but it is.
We should have
There
the
is a
most-
document there.
Yeah.
Most current information
Yeah.
possible as quickly as
Yeah.
possible. The question I have for you, sir, is as our finance director, are you comfortable with the results of this audit and you're able to implement whatever changes are necessary?
I am, sir. And I
Okay.
appreciate the work from James Moore. They've been very helpful in us getting through some difficult times, and their advice and counsel is very helpful.
And I would trust that if there are issues, you would let us know so that we can
That I
beat
would,
on this
sir.
guy accordingly. Because we can do that, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You were summarily dismissed.
Thank you, guys.
Take Doug with
Thanks,
you.
Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Nobody puts Doug in the corner.
Except Zach.
Additional items, item 22, city attorney report.
Nothing further this evening.
Item 23, city manager. We've got the substitute teacher down the end. What do you got for us, Alan?
Council, just one or two quick things. Just wanted to remind council that we do have a shade meeting next Tuesday, April 23rd at 5 p.m. Just to make sure it's on your calendar.
In the conference room.
It's, yeah, that's where we usually, yep, okay. I'm sorry, and the workshop on the
And then
23rd.
workshop.
On the 23rd, yep, right after that. You kind of beat me to the punch, Mayor. As everyone knows, we've been going through a big project over the last couple of years. We've really ramped up recently, which is the new finance and HR system. It's a really heavy lift for the finance department. Dr. Scott Niels has had no easy task of coming in the middle of budget, audit, ERP. We just keep throwing stuff at him until he falls down. He hasn't fallen down yet, so we're going to keep on throwing things his way. But I do want to...
If he falls down, just pick him up and keep going.
But I do also want to provide my thanks from the dais for the hard work, the men and women in the finance department pushing through, getting the audit done, their daily jobs, as well as double job on top of that, working on the ERP. I hear great things from our project manager each day, and also from the people that we're working with to help us implement the system. So thank you very much.
City Council Committee reports, Art House, we currently have nobody on that until we have an elected position. First Step Shelter, Mr. Chase.
No update, just.
Nothing since last?
Correct. When were we, was that on the next agenda? When we were gonna discuss the use of funds?
We'd request that be put on the agenda. I think that was for,
Okay.
The use of the original funds for operating versus capital, that
Correct.
to
discussion.
remove the restriction to allow them to do what they need to do.
So, we can add that to, do we still have time to add it to the next one, or would that be
we can
As
second
soon
May?
as possible.
Can't we?
No, well, we have to take council action, so, and it's, I don't think it's a long discussion. If we could get that on the May 7th agenda, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Who's gonna add the agenda item is what I was asking. We can handle that later.
Yeah.
There's time. Port Orange South Daytona Chamber of Commerce, this Thursday is I have to admit, there are some good things that happen outside of Port Orange, and the Daytona Tortugas is one of them. They are out of town, but they will be hosting the after hours for the Port Orange South Daytona Chamber this Thursday from 5 to 7, I believe in the picnic porch at City Island at Jackie Robinson Ballpark. So if anybody can make that, that's always a
before
nice
the
event.
game.
There's no game this Thursday.
Okay.
So there's no Thirsty Thursday to compete against or anything like that. And roundtable of elected officials, I believe, have reported that we met, we got an update on the upcoming election for the half-cent sales tax beginning via mail May 1st. And of course, the big presentation from the county on growth management. Growth management is going to be a very hot topic moving forward, and we were reviewed of the, it was reviewed with us, the work that was done in the last iteration about 15 years ago or so, and we're going to continue to talk amongst the mayors about what we can do to improve that as we move forward and modernize that. I have to do this, Jack. This may
Yes,
be
sir.
your last council meeting.
Yes,
It
sir.
might not be.
True.
We do have a workshop next week, in which case you may have cast your last vote. You might not have. We don't know. But what we will know for sure is April 30th, which is 2 weeks from today, is Election Day in the city of Port Orange. I want to remind everybody to get out and vote. Polling places will be open. A lot of people who vote by mail have already received ballots. There are 5 good candidates to choose from. Make your choice wisely, and if one of those candidates emerges from that race on April 30th with 50% plus one, May 7th we'll have a swearing-in ceremony. If they don't, the top two vote getters.
Did you say Gators?
Yeah.
Is it your son going to UCF?
I have one son who's a
I
Gator,
know.
and I have another who's going to be a Knight. See, this is how we get off target. If we have a runoff, it will occur 10 weeks later in June between the top two vote getters. So I would encourage everybody to mark it on your calendars to get out and vote 2 weeks from today. Jack, if this is your last meeting, thank you very much for stepping up. Appreciate you sitting there, really do.
Thank you for the opportunity. Mayor, just on that note of the election, just real quick, I know, what is it? Park
there's two precincts that, why is it jumping out of my head, right off Nova, Parkwood. Those, I don't believe those are viable, precincts anymore. What, I'm sorry?
Lisa
They've been
Lewis
moved?
took care of moving it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Very good.
yeah, it's all been updated.
Our supervisor of elections for a very, it was supposed to be an off year for her. She's been quite busy. She has been quite busy. And lastly, I wanted to thank everybody who did the hard work on Yorktown Boulevard to get that sidewalk redone and regraded. I heard from somebody after a large heavy rain whose kid did not have to walk to school either in the road or in the water.
Yeah.
They were actually able to use the sidewalk, and they were absolutely elated, so thanks a lot for that. With that, if nothing else comes before us this evening, have a good night.